I would like to take this opportunity to present an unorthodox choice given to a voter on the ballot. It is the none of the above option. I will explain. This presentation was inspired by my wondering, what if NOTA were present in Indonesian elections nationally? Does NOTA have a place in Indonesia's presidential and legislative elections? The picture on the right shows that it does have a place in Thailand's elections. They call it Vote No, placed at the bottom of the ballot. May Indonesian voters choose none of the above in the future? Indonesia is actually already familiar with kotak kosong, or blank box, in Pilkada, or head of region elections. Thus, the concept is not totally foreign. And this is how it is presented on Colombia's ballot for presidential elections. Voto en blanco literally means blank vote. I will come back to this later. What is NOTA? It stands for none of the above. Foley, in 1975, argues, an elector who desires to vote and not forgo his franchise, who desires not to write in a specific name for the office, and who desires to register a protest against the listed organizational candidates thrust upon him, ought to be able to have his choice formally counted. Nevada, USA, became the first to adopt NOTA in 1975. Archelaus, Mauser, and Spindler, in 1978, wrote, existing voting options, write-in, spoiling ballot, and not turning out to vote, have two distinct disadvantages as they lack commonality and recognition because their causes and intentions are not apparent. While voter turnout may gain some notice, a poor turnout is commonly attributed to voter apathy rather than to deliberate choice against the official candidates. Not turning out to vote is less meaningful and/or unrecognized. Ambrose, Greiner, and Zednik, more recently in 2019, contended, a NOTA vote is distinct from a null vote, that is, a purposefully or accidentally spoiled ballot. In some countries, such as in Italy, Sweden, or Spain, where there is no official blank vote option, blank ballots, that is, empty ballot papers, are recorded separately from null votes, that is, spoiled ballot papers. Why does NOTA exist? Foley in 1975 emphasized the need for the voter's choice be formally counted, both for all candidates and for none of those candidates. Ambrose, Greiner, and Zednik in 2019 expanded. The primary political motivation for introducing a NOTA option on the ballot is to offer an explicit protest choice to voters, and a way to express dissatisfaction with the available set of candidates, or more generally, with the political discourse and establishment. A NOTA option may also be necessary for legal reasons, particularly when voting is electronic. In 2013, the Supreme Court of India ruled that electronic voting deprives voters of the option to reject all candidates without giving up their right to vote, and thus, all electronic ballots have to include a NOTA option. Ambrose then pointed out the importance of NOTA. A large number of explicit protest votes can affect the perceived legitimacy of the winning candidate and can convey important information to political parties, potentially influencing their policy choices. In the absence of a NOTA option on the ballot, protest may take the form of abstention, nullification of the ballot, or a vote for a non-establishment candidate, even when the voter does not like the candidate or his or her proposed policies. However, these behaviours are blurry signals of protest as they may also result from other motives or, in the case of nullification, simply be involuntary mistakes. Here you see countries that have embraced NOTA. Nevada was first in 1975. Colombia adopted after 1991. India has it for federal and state legislative elections since 2013. Spain for legislative elections. How about Indonesia? The Constitutional Court has legalized the blank box. Therefore, the introduction of NOTA is only a small step further. The partly shaded countries mean NOTA exists not as a specific box on the ballot, but rather blank votes are counted separately from spoilt ones. Spain, Sweden, Italy, Argentina. Or like Indonesia, it exists only in certain circumstances. Let's now see a video explaining India's NOTA.
You don't like Narendra Modi, you don't like Rahul Gandhi. You think none of the political parties have actually done enough to earn your vote. Well, you have an option to vote for none of the above, also known as NOTA. What is NOTA? Well, in simple terms, NOTA is an option exercised by a voter to show that he has no confidence either on the contesting candidates or the parties in the fray for the elections. The Supreme Court said that this particular practice of NOTA will go a long way in cleansing the political system and discourse of the country, and directed the Election Commission to include the option of NOTA in EVM machines for elections in this country. Well, it doesn't really count. Still, the candidate who gets the maximum amount of vote in his or her favor will win the elections. NOTA doesn't really make a difference, and hence political parties are not that worried about the option being exercised by a fellow voter. Well, no. Before NOTA was introduced, we could not register the vote of NOTA on an EVM machine, but you had the right of voting for none of the above. How did it function? You enter the polling booth. Rather than pressing a button on the EVM machine, you write down none of the above on a piece of paper, you fold it and put on a paper ballot box. It was that paper ballot box which counted for the votes of NOTA. So, basically, in this country, you have an option. Either to vote for an electoral party that you wish to see in power, or make it clear that you do not believe in any of the candidates or the parties in the fray. Either how, you have to go out there, stand in the queue and vote, because your vote counts.
India's biggest motivation, as explained by their Supreme Court, is to provide a confidential way for voters to not vote for any candidates. At the time of decision, India's e-voting machines, EVMs, don't have any buttons other than for a party or candidate. Hence, a NOTA button had to be intentionally provided, as the paper ballot option did not provide secrecy. It is an acknowledgement that NOTA is a secret choice that must be provided to voters. Does NOTA increase voter turnout, you might ask? Ambrus's experiments in the US and Austria showed potential of new voters to come out. Voter turnout data shows increase after 1991 for Colombia and 2013 for India. Let me explain. Since introduction of NOTA by the 1991 Constitution of Colombia, voter turnout has been increasing since 1994. Since the 2013 Indian Supreme Court decision, voter turnout has hit record high, but beware of the Modi factor, which turned people out to vote in droves. Nevertheless, Ucheli, Chatterjee and Szabo's study states, in India, we found that NOTA increased turnout. We found minimal substitution between candidates and NOTA, indicating that NOTA votes are cast by new voters who turn out to vote specifically for this option. The world average of voter turnout globally has been in steady increase until 2008, where since then it has been slowly but steadily decreasing. As such, efforts for increasing turnout is a desirable issue to discuss. Voter turnout in Asia and the Pacific region since 1999 has always been higher than the global average. Indonesia, in particular, is actually much higher than either. Therefore, in Indonesia, turnout may not be the biggest motivation for introduction of NOTA. However, an even higher turnout would be beneficial. NOTA formalizes abstention. Those who cannot make up their minds can expressively vote NOTA instead of tacitly spoiling their ballots or returning a blank ballot. In 2011, the Colombian Constitutional Court declared the blank vote as a political expression of dissent, abstention or nonconformity with political effects, through which the protection of the freedom of the voter is promoted, from Super T 2014, page 12. NOTA formalizes dissent. Supertie in 2015 also observed that California Proposition 23 for the None of the Above Act, 2000, declares that blank voting is a form of active dissent, as opposed to abstention, since not voting does not get you heard, it just gets you labelled as apathetic. Let's see an example. Ambrus, Greiner, and Zednick in 2019 conducted experiments in the US, just before the 2016 presidential elections where Trump got elected. And in Austria, after the first round presidential elections resulted in two extreme candidates went through to the second round in 2016. They divided a sample of 2,000 US and 3,000 Austrian respondents into three and provided each group with a type of ballot: without NOTA, weak NOTA, and strong NOTA. Without NOTA has no NOTA option on the ballot. Weak NOTA has the option, but without any explanations. Strong NOTA has the option along with detailed explanations on what NOTA is, mimicking an extensive voter education campaign that normally takes place in the weeks ahead of voting. By creating these three experimental conditions, they wanted to see the different effects on voting behavior. Notice how the existence of NOTA option had reduced Trump's votes from the without NOTA experiment. NOTA appeared to affect non-establishment candidates more because in the absence of NOTA, protest voters tend to vote for the non-establishment candidate, even though they don't necessarily support the person. In Austria, Ambrus, Greiner, and Zednik found, first, where both candidates are from the extreme ends of the political spectrum, both actually lost votes to NOTA compared to the without NOTA experiment. Secondly, invalid votes and abstentions had also decreased as a natural consequence of voters choosing NOTA rather than spoiling their ballots. In both instances, voters were receptive towards the existence of the NOTA option. Unlike in the US example, none of the candidates came from the establishment. As such, both were affected by the existence of the NOTA option. Can NOTA ever win? Archelaus, Mauser, and Spindler in 1978 argued yes. They contended, in order to make this option meaningful, it should be treated like any other alternative. That is, if it receives a plurality, then it should win. A win by this option would mean that none of the official candidates would be allowed to take office, or possibly, when the NADA option receives a majority rather than a plurality, none of the official candidates would be allowed to be on subsequent ballots. This is adopted to a large extent by the Colombian Constitution in 1991, where, according to Super T in 2014, only in Colombia does the victory of this vote have actual consequences. If the blank vote wins the majority of the votes, the election needs to be repeated, although only the first time. In this case, the candidates who are present in the invalidated election cannot participate in the new elections. Parties and government therefore interpret any increase of the blank vote as a serious threat. This makes it an important and significant channel of accountability. Colombia also knows the Indonesian-style kotak kosong in single-candidate situations, where if the blank box wins, the losing candidate may not run again. In the unlikely event where the NOTA wins again, then the candidate with the highest number of votes is declared the winner. And so, what happens when NOTA wins? In Colombia, it results in disqualification in the next round. In Spain, and Colombia too, it may deprive certain parties from achieving parliamentary threshold. In Nevada and India, no consequence at all. Let's now go back to Indonesia. What benefits could NOTA bring? First, voter turnout is already high, but potentially will still draw out those who have been staying home and increase turnout further. Second, especially in Pilpres and Pilkada, presidential and head of region elections respectively, where the number of candidates are too few, NOTA may impose a legitimacy threshold, just like in Colombia. Third, NOTA will clarify how many the so-called golput people, that is, the dissenting voters, actually are, so long they go out to vote. Fourth, if the kotak kosong phenomenon is here to stay, be prepared, as it may need to be extended from Pilkada to Pilpres. Finally, my conclusion. NOTA adds more choice where choice is limited. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Hope this presentation inspires you.